Hi, this is Margaret, and welcome to Commercial Buildings. If you have taken a class like architectural plans, you did residential buildings, houses, or maybe you've done construction building houses. So that's all residential. What we're going to look at this term is what's involved with commercial drawing and construction. So first of all, let's get clear on what that means. And just to be confusing, commercial can refer to a sector, which we'll look at next, or it could mean some kinds of users within a sector. So I'll show you what I mean. So in the building code, there's a subset of the building code called the International Energy Conservation Code, IECC, and they say that a commercial sector is anything that is not residential. And what do they mean by residential? They mean houses, so 1 and 2 family dwellings, or things like apartment buildings that are low-rise. So a 3-story apartment would not be commercial in their category, in their system, but a 4-story would. That's the way they do it. In general, there are 4 categories, and these categories are divided by occupancy. And you know, in the building code talks about occupancies. In other words, how are these spaces being used? So in the commercial sector, you have public buildings, and those could be things like city halls, courthouses, schools, libraries, all that sort of place where people gather. Then institutional could be a place either where people are confined, like in a prison, or where people have some limitations. Maybe they're young and they're in daycare, they're old and they're in residential care, they're sick so they're in the hospital, those kinds of uses. Then industrial, kind of self-explanatory, that's the category that deals with warehouses, manufacturing of things, that sort of thing. Not retail sales, but where the stuff actually gets made or stored. And then the commercial category within the commercial sector is, this is essentially retail. So it could be retail stores, it could be restaurants and lounges and things, it could be office buildings. Those are all thought of as commercial uses. Many professionals glop the first 2 together and they think of 3 categories. So for many professionals, institutional is anything that's public or institutional. That's all put together. And then the other 2 are the standard industrial and commercial. What is this AEC? Let's go look at that. We're going to encounter several acronyms during the term, and this is one. AEC, you'll see this a lot. This stands for Architecture, Engineering, and Construction. This is the field of designing and building that is related to commercial buildings. And later on in the term, I think it's about week 5 or so, we will start looking at how are these commercial projects organized. So it's more formal and more constrained than a residential project. There are certain things you have to do when you're doing commercial building. So we'll look at that. So that's one acronym, AEC. Another acronym you'll run into a lot is AIA, which stands for American Institute of Architects. And as far as I know, every licensed architect belongs to the AIA. It's not required, they don't have to, but they really need it. This is a really important organization that has, if you go to the AIA website, you'll see they have just a vast array of standards and helpful documents and guidance and example projects and awards, and it is quite eye-opening. So that's the AIA. Another acronym you will hear a lot in commercial building is CSI, which is not the TV show. It's Construction Specification Institute. If you have heard of specs, so a contractor might say, oh, I've got to go consult the specs. Specs is short for specifications, and that is the written instructions that go along with the drawings to guide the contractor and the subcontractors, laying out very precisely how a thing shall be built. And as we'll see later, about the middle of the term, the drawings and the specifications and the contract materials together make up the construction documents. So why this is important is the specs are a legally binding document, and if your project gets into litigation, which is surprisingly common, you wind up in the courtroom often. When you get into litigation, it is really important that everything be spelled out in as much detail as possible, and that there be not very much wiggle room in the specs, because somebody can wiggle out of whatever it was you specified if you don't write them correctly. So the CSI gives some, what do they call it, model specs that architects can use that have been gone over by attorneys, so they're very, very solid, and then the architects just modify them a little bit to suit the project. We'll look at specs in more detail when we talk about contracting in the middle of the term. And another tool that CSI puts out is called master format. We'll also look at that when we look at contracting. Master format is that big numbering system. You've probably seen it. If you do bidding on a certain kind of material, maybe you are a roofer and you do bidding on roofing, or maybe you do sheet metal work and you do bidding on sheet metal, your specs and all the written documents that go with your work are assigned a certain division number within the master format system. There are 50 divisions, and then they're divided down finer and finer, so that you can always find what you're looking for, and there's no duplication. So these are really important also. Those two groups, the AIA and the CSI, came together with another group that did some about CAD layers and plotting, but mostly it's AIA and CSI who came together to develop the drawing standards that we use for architectural drawings. And this is for the US, I should say. This is not Europe and Asia. So in the US, we use this standard called the U.S. National CAD Standard, or NCS for short. And next time, we will begin talking about what does the National CAD Standard say, and we'll try and get a handle on precisely what's in it.